My name is Claire Reynolds. I'm 32 years old, a senior marketing executive in downtown Chicago. I have a view of the lake from my apartment, a circle of close friends I trust, and a career I built brick by brick long before anyone thought I could. From the outside, I have what people would call a successful life. And I do. But success, I've learned, doesn't always insulate you from heartbreak, especially the kind that comes from your own family. Growing up in the leafy, affluent suburb of Brookfield just outside of Boston, everything in our world looked perfect. Our colonial-style house had 2 staircases, a piano we didn't play, and a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a magazine. My parents, Charles and Diane Reynolds, were the kind of people who believed appearances mattered more than anything else. Charles was a financial consultant with a Rolex collection, and a laugh that turned hollow when the cameras stopped rolling. Diane had been a corporate litigator until my younger brother Evan was born. After that, she poured her energy into curating the Reynolds brand, as I used to joke, though she never laughed when I did. We were the picture of suburban success. But even from a young age, I understood there were 2 very different roles in our family, Evan, the adored younger sibling, and me, the one expected to understand why I'd always come second. Evan is 3 years younger than me, with a poet's soul, and a gift for making people believe in his potential. He was the kind of child who charmed waiters into bringing him extra dessert, and the kind of teen who failed classes only to be praised for his creative spirit. When I got straight A's, it was expected. When he passed a single exam, it was cause for celebration. My father would say, "Claire, you're the dependable one," as if that made up for the fact that Evan could do no wrong. My mother would smile and tell me, "You're so strong. You don't need as much." Maybe they didn't think I'd notice the difference. Maybe they assumed I'd be grateful just to be included at all. But inclusion has its limits, especially when it's conditional. 3 weeks before Christmas, I was neck-deep in campaign pitches finalizing a year-end rebrand for one of our biggest clients when my phone rang. Mom lit up the screen. I answered out of habit, tucking the phone between my shoulder and cheek while still scanning spreadsheets. "Hi, honey," she chirped. Her tone was high and a little too cheerful, her default when she was about to say something uncomfortable. "Hey, Mom, what's up?" "Oh, just calling to check in. How are things in Chicago? Still snowing? Not yet, but give it a few days. Work's been crazy with year-end projects." She offered a clipped, "That's nice," then cleared her throat. "Listen about Christmas this year." I stopped clicking. "Yeah, well, it's going to be a little different. We're doing some renovations, repainting the dining room, replacing some fixtures. It's a bit chaotic." I frowned. "Okay, but I can stay in the guest room. I don't mind a little chaos." It's not just that, she continued, voice drifting. "Evan is bringing Melissa, his girlfriend. And you know how your father gets when too many people are around." I stared at my monitor, the numbers on the screen blurring. "So, what are you saying?" There was a pause. "We think it might be better to keep it small this year. Just the 3 of us. Well, 4 with Melissa." I sat back in my chair, blinking. "You're not inviting me to Christmas." "Oh, Claire, it's not like that," she said quickly. "You're always so busy with work and the timing just isn't ideal. We thought you'd understand." There it was, my family's favorite compliment masquerading as dismissal. Understanding. My job wasn't to be loved. It was to be reasonable, to make space. "You've always been so independent," she added, as if that explained everything. I swallowed hard. "Sure. I get it. You're not upset, are you?" Honestly, it might be a relief not to have to travel. Flights are so expensive. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. My mouth had gone dry. "Yeah," I managed. "It's fine. I'll figure something out." "Great. We'll FaceTime on Christmas morning. Oh, and if you're sending gifts, just ship them to the house by the 20th. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage or scream or call to argue. I just sat there in the quiet of my apartment, staring at the twinkling lights of the half-decorated tree I hadn't finished trimming. I thought about every Christmas I'd ever attended. Evan arriving late and still being the star of the show. My gifts, carefully chosen modest set beside his piles of electronics gadgets, expensive clothes. I thought about the times I offered to help in the kitchen, only to be told I was in the way while Evan lounged on the couch with a mimosa. And now this. Not just forgotten, actively uninvited. When I told Adam later that night, he put down the takeout container he was holding and walked straight over. "Then spend Christmas with my family," he said simply. "I don't want to intrude. You wouldn't be. My mom already asks about you all the time. Come, you deserve a real holiday." His family lived in Evanston, warm, noisy, affectionate. 3 siblings, all with kids. A tree that touched the ceiling. No unspoken rules, no hierarchy. Just joy. I looked at him holding out his hand, waiting, not pushing, just offering. And I realized they weren't just excluding me from a holiday. They were writing me out of the story of our family. I took his hand. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I'll come." I did my best to throw myself into the new Christmas plans. Adam's family welcomed me like I'd been showing up every year. His mom, Linda, was a petite powerhouse of a woman with a booming laugh and arms always ready for a hug. His dad, Mike, had a habit of topping off everyone's hot cocoa with just a little too much bourbon, pretending not to notice the children's scandalized giggles. Their house in Evanston was the polar opposite of the one I grew up in. Warm instead of pristine, lived in instead of staged. The kind of place where you could leave your shoes by the door and someone would throw a blanket over your feet before you even asked. I'd barely stepped into their front hall when one of Adam's nieces ran up and threw her arms around me, yelling, "Auntie Claire," even though no one had told her to call me that. "Sorry," Adam whispered in my ear, smiling. "Don't be," I whispered back. That evening, I helped his sisters roll out sugar cookies while carols played too loudly from a dusty speaker in the kitchen. A flower fight broke out when someone spilled vanilla extract and Linda didn't scold us. She just laughed and handed out wet rags. At dinner, we all crammed around the big dining table, bumping elbows and passing dishes, until no one knew who had the mashed potatoes last. Someone pulled a cracker and a paper crown landed askew on my head. I left it there. I should have felt comforted. And in some ways I did. But the ache never fully left. It was dull and persistent, like pressing on a bruise just to see if it still hurt. On Christmas morning, Adam's youngest niece curled up next to me in her pajamas while I braided her hair in the fancy way she liked. The smell of cinnamon rolls drifted in from the kitchen, Linda's signature holiday recipe. I smiled and tried to keep my eyes on the moment, not on my phone. But when the texts started rolling in from friends and co-workers, "Merry Christmas. Hope your day is beautiful," I couldn't help myself. I opened Instagram. My mother had posted a photo just 10 minutes earlier. It was the living room I knew by heart. Our tree 12 feet tall, decorated in gold and burgundy ribbons. The fireplace lit, crackling. Evan and Melissa stood by the hearth, smiling. Diane and Charles flanked them both, holding wine glasses like this was some sort of Christmas magazine spread. The caption read, "The Reynolds family together again. Wishing you all a warm and joyful holiday. The Reynolds family." I stared at the photo, then at the fireplace mantel. There were 4 stockings hung neatly in a row: Charles, Diane, Evan, and Melissa. Mine was missing. It had been red velvet with my name embroidered in gold thread. I remembered tracing those letters as a kid, hoping Santa might notice how neatly I'd written my Christmas list. Year after year it had hung in the same place, sometimes a little crooked, always slightly smaller than Evan's. But it was there. Always there. Now it was gone. Packed away. Thrown out. Given to goodwill. I didn't know which option hurt more. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. Adam returned from the kitchen with mugs of coffee, but I quickly locked my phone and smiled like nothing had happened. I didn't want to bring sadness into the joy he had so generously shared with me. I didn't want to make this Christmas about the one I'd lost. But that night, after the laughter had faded and everyone had gone home, I lay beside him in bed and stared at the ceiling. The image of that stockingless mantle burned into my memory. You okay? He whispered, turning toward me in the dark. I'm trying to be, I said. It was a beautiful day. He didn't press, just reached over and gently took my hand. I squeezed back and tried not to cry. It felt childish mourning, a stocking, a photo, a title left out of a caption. But it wasn't just a stocking. It was what it meant. You spend your whole life hoping your parents will finally see you, I whispered. Then one day you realize they never even looked. I hadn't said it out loud before. Saying it made it feel final, like closing a door I'd been holding open with my foot for decades just in case. In case they changed. In case they noticed. The next morning, I opened my phone again, scrolling through more pictures. Diane had posted a perfectly plated Christmas dinner. Evan unwrapping what looked like a designer watch, Melissa laughing as she opened a Tiffany box. The house looked untouched. No sign of renovation, no torn-up dining room, no construction tape, no chaos. Just clean perfection. A lie wrapped in tinsel. I zoomed in on one photo to be sure, yep, the dining room was exactly as it had always been. The chairs freshly upholstered, the chandelier gleaming. My mother's china on the table, even the cloth napkins folded into elaborate fans. So it hadn't been about the house. Maybe it never was. I thought about calling, demanding an explanation, screaming, crying, pleading. But what would be the point? They had already shown me everything I needed to see. I closed the app, tossed the phone across the couch, and walked to the window. Snow had started to fall, fat snowflakes blanketing the quiet Chicago street. Behind me, Adam turned on music in the kitchen. I heard the familiar clink of mugs and the start of another pot of coffee. I turned toward the sound, toward the life I was choosing, imperfect, but honest, messy, but real. And I didn't look back. The day after I got back to Chicago, the apartment felt still in a way that wasn't comforting. My suitcase sat by the door, half unpacked. A few leftover cookies from Adam's family were wrapped on the counter. The tree in the corner blinked dutifully, as if unaware that Christmas was over. I dropped my coat on a chair and opened my laptop, ready to start catching up on work emails before the office reopened. There were 47 new messages. I scanned the subject lines: marketing reports, campaign feedback, a reminder from HR about year-end benefits. Then one stood out, tucked between the clutter like a splinter. Subject: financial matters. Urgent. The sender: Charles Reynolds. My breath hitched. My father rarely emailed me directly. Usually any family communication passed through my mother or was awkwardly relayed through group texts where my name felt like an afterthought. The last time I'd received an email from him, I was 28, and he needed tax documentation for my student loans. I clicked it open. Claire attached. Please find an invoice for your portion of recent family expenses. Given your current financial position, it is appropriate for you to contribute proportionately. Payment due by January 15th. Regards, Charles Reynolds. That was it. No hope. You had a nice holiday? No. We missed you this Christmas. Not even a perfunctory love, Dad. Just a transaction. I stared at the attachment, a PDF labeled Invoice Y4328.pdf. For a second, I actually wondered if it had been sent by mistake. Or maybe meant for someone else. But no. My name was right there in the header, Claire M. Reynolds. With a sinking feeling, I opened the file. It looked like a professional document company letterhead, line items, formatting that made it clear this wasn't casually thrown together. The amount due, $8,100. Underneath a list of itemized expenses. Evan Reynolds professional development trip to Europe, Paris, Rome, Amsterdam, $4. 200. Melissa Harper, travel companion. Flights, lodging, meals, $2, $800. Photography equipment, upgrade camera, plus lens, $1, $100. Beneath that, wiring instructions for their bank account and a note: late payments subject to 1.5% weekly interest. I read it twice, then a third time slower. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, but there were no words. No reaction that felt strong enough to match what was happening in front of me. They had excluded me from Christmas, then sent me a bill for the one they did host. My phone was on the kitchen counter. I walked over, picked it up with hands that were suddenly trembling, and called Maya. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, how was Christmas with Adam's crew? Did they hug you to death?" "Maya," I said, barely managing to speak, "I just got the weirdest email from my dad." There was a pause. "Weird how I forwarded it to you. Check your inbox." I heard the soft clack of her keyboard through the phone, then silence. "Wait, what the actual hell?" she said flatly. "This is real. This isn't some kind of sick joke." "Nope, he invoiced you. For Evan's trip. With his girlfriend. And a camera. Are they serious? It has a due date. And interest penalties." She started, then stopped. "Claire, this isn't just favoritism anymore. This is straight-up exploitation." The word struck like a match inside my chest. I'd spent so many years rationalizing, minimizing, justifying. They just love Evan differently. They know I can take care of myself. They don't mean to be hurtful. But suddenly it was all illuminated. Not subtle, not ambiguous. This was what it looked like when people didn't see you as family, but as a resource. Maya was still talking. "You need to send this to someone. A lawyer, or a therapist, or the IRS, honestly. This is insane." I let out a small, humorless laugh. I'm still trying to figure out what hurts more. The invoice itself, or the fact that there was no note. No check-in, just a demand. "Because they don't see it as a demand," Maya said. "They see it as your duty. They've trained you to believe this is normal." I sank into a chair. The Christmas lights from the tree flickered on, automatically mocking me with their cheer. "Adam doesn't even know yet. I didn't want to ruin the mood yesterday. Tell him," she said gently. "He should know. You deserve to be supported through this." After we hung up, I stared at the email again. I could practically hear my father's voice in its tone, calm, authoritative, professional, like he was balancing a ledger, not dismantling a relationship. I pictured him justifying it to my mother sipping whiskey in the study, saying something like, "It's only fair. Claire makes more than enough. And Evan's career needs investment." The resentment rose like bile. I had put myself through college, taken out nearly 6 figures in student loans, worked 2 jobs during undergrad. I never asked them for help. Evan, meanwhile, had never paid a dime for anything, and now I was being told I owed them. Adam walked in, then setting down his keys, a paper bag of groceries in hand. He leaned down to kiss the top of my head. "You okay?" I turned the screen toward him. "Check this out." He read in silence, his jaw tightening. "You've got to be kidding me." I shook my head. They didn't even invite me to Christmas, and now they want me to pay for the one I wasn't at. This is... He exhaled hard. "I don't even know what this is. It's not just manipulative. It's offensive." "It wasn't just about money," I said quietly. "It was about what I was worth to them. And apparently, I was only worth what I could provide." We sat in silence for a while. The only sound was the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint hiss of snow against the windows. I hadn't even begun to figure out how to respond, but I knew one thing: I wouldn't be wiring them a single cent. The phone rang twice before my father picked up. "Claire," he said evenly, as if we hadn't spoken in months, as if he hadn't just sent me a bill like I was a vendor. "I assume you've received my email." "I have," I said. "I need to understand. Why would you send that to me?" There was a pause. Evan needed support for his portfolio trip. Melissa contributed artistic direction, and the equipment was necessary to produce gallery-worthy work. "You're in a position to help now. It's only fair." Fair. The word rang out like a bell I'd heard my whole life, always applied backwards. "You didn't invite me to Christmas," I said flatly, "but you sent me an invoice for Evan's holiday and career expenses." "That's unrelated," he said without missing a beat. The house was crowded, and with the renovations. There were no renovations. I snapped more forcefully than I intended. You posted pictures, remember? The dining room was spotless. The tree was perfect. The mantel was full well almost. Silence. Then my mother's voice, soft and fluttery, came onto the line. "Claire, honey, can we just all take a breath?" "You knew," I said. She hesitated. "We discussed it. Evan's trip was important, and he's at a delicate point in his career. And what about me?" I asked. "What about all the years I covered my own expenses, took out loans, lived on ramen, while you were helping him rent a luxury apartment in New York?" "Oh, sweetheart," she sighed. "You've always been so independent. There it was, the refrain of my life. You're so strong. You're so capable. You've never needed much." I closed my eyes, remembering. 16 years old, saving babysitting money for a used Honda Civic, while Evan got a brand new Jeep with a red bow and 0 conditions. Graduating high school with honors, offered a partial scholarship to Princeton, and told they could only contribute $10,000 a year. "It'll build character," Dad had said. I'd graduated with $87,000 in debt. Evan, 2 years later, got into NYU for photography, not exactly practical, as my parents used to say about everything I liked, and they paid in full. Tuition, apartment, even his camera gear. "It's just different," Mom would say whenever I asked. "Evan needs more. He's sensitive." "He's not a child," I said now, voice shaking. "He's 30. I'm not just your emergency fund. You're blowing this out of proportion," Dad replied, tired. "You always do when you're stressed." My hand curled into a fist at my side. There it was again, the quiet rewriting of history. I was the dramatic one, the emotional one. Never mind that I'd been composed while being ignored for decades. I hung up without another word. Then I stood in the middle of my kitchen and let myself shake. Rage, grief, disbelief, none of them strong enough to name what I was feeling. It wasn't just the injustice. It was the pattern, the consistency of it, and the terrifying realization that I had spent 3 decades normalizing it. That night, I opened the storage bins in my hall closet, old journals, photo albums, college notebooks. I wanted to prove myself wrong, to find something, anything that showed I'd been treated equally, or at least intentionally. But the photos told the same story my body already knew. Birthday parties, Evan surrounded by family, beaming beside elaborate cakes. Me in the background, holding a bookstore gift card and smiling politely. Christmases, Evan with new electronics trips, designer jackets. Me with scarves and scented candles. College letters, my acceptance folder from Princeton tucked between student loan packets. Evan's glossy NYU welcome guide came with a letter from my father. "Whatever it takes. We believe in you. Whatever it takes for him. Whatever's left for me." The next morning, I called Dr. Lena Carter, my therapist from 2 years prior when I'd been navigating workplace burnout. I hadn't needed weekly sessions in a while, but this wasn't something I could untangle alone. "I have an emergency," I told her voicemail. "It's my family. It's everything." She squeezed me in 2 days later. I sat on her familiar sofa legs curled beneath me, trying to make my voice sound steadier than I felt. "They excluded me from Christmas," I said, then sent me an $8 $100 invoice for my brother's trip, and his girlfriend, and equipment. Dr. Carter nodded slowly. "That's a lot." I kept going. "And they framed it like it was my role to pay, because I'm successful now, because I'm stable, because I've always been so independent. But I had to be. They never gave me the option not to be." She folded her hands. "Can I share something, please?" "There's a dynamic I often see in families like yours," she said gently. "One child becomes the golden child. They receive support, excuses, praise. The other becomes the scapegoat or caretaker, expected to be mature to hold the emotional weight. They're told they're independent not because they are, but because they had to be. The words landed like something I'd always known but never had the vocabulary for. I thought I was just the strong one, I said. The one who didn't need much. You were trained to believe that, she said. But it was never true. Everyone needs support. Love. Fairness. I swallowed the lump in my throat. So what now? How do I fix this? This isn't about fixing them. Claire, she said softly, this is about naming what's real and deciding what you're willing to accept from here on out. I stared at the ceiling, eyes burning. The hardest part isn't the injustice, I murmured. It's realizing you were trained to accept it. She nodded. But now you see it. And once you do, you can't unsee it. For the first time in days, I breathed deeply. Not because the pain had passed, but because something had cracked open inside me, and light was starting to leak through. The week after my therapy session with Dr. Carter, I couldn't sleep. Each night I stayed up late, surrounded by shoeboxes of memories I hadn't looked through in years. Old birthday cards, school awards, scribbled notes from high school friends, and letters I'd once written but never sent. I wasn't trying to wallow in the past. I was trying to verify it. To make sure the memories weren't lying to me. Every photo, every email, every voicemail confirmed what my body had always known, even if my mind tried to ignore it. I had carried more than my share, and no one had even noticed I was tired. One photo stood out me at my college graduation mortarboard, slightly crooked, holding my diploma and smiling like my life depended on it. My parents were beside me, stiff smiles, holding a congratulatory banner they'd reused from Evan's high school party. I remembered how I'd paid my own way to get there: student loans, campus jobs, borrowed textbooks. I remembered how they left early that day to catch a Broadway show on their way back to Boston. Another memory surfaced, me calling home the night before surgery for a minor but frightening procedure. Evan had just opened a new gallery show, and my mom told me she was too emotionally exhausted to talk because he was so stressed about turnout. When I pulled up my old text threads, they were littered with moments like that, requests for me to check their flight itineraries to send money for Evan's car repair, to help James sort out his student loan stuff, even though I was the one still drowning in mine. Every gesture they asked from me came with the expectation that I'd say yes. And I always had. Until now. It was around 2:00 a.m., halfway through another insomnia scroll, when I remembered something random. I was still an authorized user on my parents' credit cards. It had been set up when I was in college, supposedly to build my credit, though I'd stopped using those cards a decade ago. Still, my name had remained there, quiet, invisible, tethered. I logged into the old accounts. My name was still listed on 3 cards. I had no spending access anymore, no statements mailed to me, no alerts. But technically, I was still part of them. Still connected. Still a financial footnote in their system. The symbolism hit hard. I was looped into their structure, but never acknowledged in it. Not considered. Not discussed. Just there. The next morning, I scheduled an appointment with Andrea Fisher, my financial advisor, the same woman who helped me pay off my student loans and make my first investment. Her office overlooked the Chicago River sunlight, glinting off the glass like a promise I'd almost forgotten. I need to remove myself from my parents' accounts, I told her. I don't use them, but I don't want my name attached anymore. Not financially, not symbolically. She raised an eyebrow but didn't ask for details. Good decision. You've established your own credit history. Removing yourself won't hurt your score. I'll walk you through the process. In less than an hour, I'd made the calls. Each customer service rep asked the same things. Was there fraud? Are you sure? But I stayed firm. I'm just asserting financial independence, I said, and meant it. Walking back to my apartment, I felt something shift. It wasn't dramatic, not like flipping a switch. It was quiet, internal, but real. When I got home, I sat at my desk and opened a blank Word document. It was time to respond to the invoice. I started with rage, then I tried sarcasm, then hurt, then diplomacy. Each draft felt wrong, too emotional or too flat, too loud or too soft. No matter how I phrased it, the words wouldn't land. My parents didn't hear me when I cried. They didn't hear me when I was calm. They didn't even notice when I was gone. What could I possibly say that would make them hear me? Now. I closed the laptop and sat there staring at the ceiling, and then almost as if my body moved before my brain could think it through, I stood up, opened my stationery drawer, and pulled out a blank holiday card. It wasn't overly festive, just a watercolor of a snow-covered street lamp lights glowing. Inside, I wrote 7 words Santa skipped me, too. Merry Christmas, anyway. I opened my wallet, pulled out a single dollar bill, and folded it neatly inside. I sealed the card and addressed it to my parents' house in Brookfield. At the post office, I asked for certified mail with return receipt, not out of pettiness, but because I needed to know they saw it. I needed to draw a line in the sand that couldn't be erased later or retold differently. When I dropped the envelope into the blue metal mailbox, something strange happened. I smiled. Not a big one. Not triumphant, but real. It wasn't revenge I was after. I didn't want to hurt them. I didn't even want them to hurt like I had. I just wanted to be free. To stop being the family's invisible backbone. To stop earning love I never received. To stop explaining pain to people who refuse to acknowledge it. To stop hoping. I didn't want revenge. I whispered aloud, watching the mail truck drive off. I wanted release. And finally, I had it. The certified mail receipt landed in my inbox exactly 3 days after I sent the card. My parents had signed for it at 9:13 a.m. By 10:02, the fallout began. First came the texts. From my father, Charles Reynolds. What is the meaning of this dollar bill? Charles Reynolds. Call me immediately. Charles Reynolds. This is completely unacceptable, Claire. Then a voicemail, his voice clipped and controlled in the beginning but rising in volume like a boiler about to blow. You've crossed a line, Claire. I just received notice you've removed yourself from our credit accounts. Your mother is extremely upset. This childish behavior needs to stop. If this is about the invoice, we can discuss payment plans, but undermining your family like this is disgraceful. An hour later, my mother chimed in with her signature emotional dagger Diane Reynolds voicemail. Claire, sweetheart, why are you doing this to us? After everything we've done for you, your father is furious. Please, just call and fix this. Everything they'd done for me. The phrase circled in my head like a vulture. I tried to tally what exactly that had been. What they'd done was bill me for my brother's vacation, exclude me from holidays, remind me how independent I was every time I needed something they didn't want to give. What they'd done was make me believe I needed to earn a place at the table I'd been born to sit at. By noon, Evan had joined the party. Evan Reynolds text, really classy Claire. Way to make everything about you. Mom's been crying all morning. You know I need that equipment for my career. Not everyone has a cushy corporate job. Then another, maybe they support me more because I actually make time for them. You're the one who ran off to Chicago. I didn't respond. By that evening, the extended family had picked sides. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years were suddenly in my DMs telling me I was attacking Uncle Charles and Aunt Diane after all their sacrifices. One even suggested I needed to remember what family really means. And I realized my parents had wasted no time rewriting the story. Claire, the ungrateful daughter, Claire, the troublemaker, Claire, the one who sent $1 as a spiteful joke instead of a cry for respect. But this time, I didn't cave. I didn't respond to a single message. Not out of stubbornness, but because I didn't owe them explanations they weren't interested in hearing. They wanted me to fold, to return to the role I'd played for 32 years, quiet, accommodating understanding. I stayed silent, and in the silence, something new stirred. Strength, maybe? Or peace? Or just the relief of not performing anymore. 2 days later, a new message landed in my inbox. The subject line was simple. Can we talk? It was from Joy Langston, my dad's youngest sister. Aunt Joy. She was a peripheral figure in my life. She attended major holidays growing up, always sitting a little off to the side, offering soft compliments, and disappearing before dessert. I never really knew her. I hesitated before replying. Then I said yes. We met at a quiet corner cafe near the lake. She was already there when I arrived, a scarf tucked into her coat hands wrapped around a coffee cup like it was an anchor. When she saw me, she smiled, tired but genuine. "I know this is out of the blue," she said as I sat down, "but I saw the photos, I heard the story." And I asked, cautiously, "And I want to say something that no one else in this family ever will. I see you, and you're not crazy." The words hit so hard I had to blink them away. "You know what they're saying?" I murmured. She nodded. "I also know what's true." We talked for 2 hours. I told her about the invoice, the Christmas exclusion, the emotional gymnastics I'd performed my entire life just to earn scraps of recognition. She listened without interrupting, just nodding her eyes, growing sadder with every story. Finally, I asked the question that had been gnawing at me since her email. Why reach out now?" She sighed, leaning back. "Because I've been you." Her voice softened. "Your father was the golden child growing up. My parents, your grandparents, bent everything around him. He was brilliant, charming, a little reckless. I was the responsible one. The afterthought baby, they called me." My stomach dropped. "I paid my own way through school," she continued. "Got a job right out of college. Married a stable man they didn't like. And I was always expected to be the calm one, the helper. The one who gave. Your dad, he took. And never thought twice about it." I stared at her, stunned. "So this pattern, it's generational." "Deeply," she said. "And unless someone stops it, it keeps going. You're the first one to say no, and that's brave. I just thought, maybe if I was good enough, worked hard enough, they'd finally treat me like I mattered." Joy reached across the table, her hand resting on mine. "The only thing more painful than being the scapegoat is realizing your mother once was too, and chose not to break the cycle." I felt something catch in my throat. "Do you think she knows what she's doing?" Joy paused. "Some part of her does. But she's also trying to survive it. The story your mother tells herself is that Evan needs more because he's fragile. And you're strong, which means you can take it. And they never stop to ask if you should have to." We sat in silence for a long time. Then Joy said, "Whatever happens next, whether they come around or not, you didn't do anything wrong by asking for equal treatment. You didn't destroy the family, you just stopped pretending." When we parted, she hugged me like she meant it. Like someone who saw the version of me that didn't need to earn love by shrinking. On the walk home, I realized something powerful. This wasn't just about me. It never had been. It was a legacy, one I'd finally refused to inherit. And now that I'd seen it clearly, I could never go back. When I finally called my parents, it was late Sunday afternoon. I had rehearsed what I'd say for days, pacing around my apartment with index cards and highlighted notes, trying to hold on to my truth without letting it slip through clenched teeth. Charles answered. "Claire." "Hi," I said. My voice was steady, but I felt the tremor in my chest. "We need to talk." A long pause. "I'm glad you called. Your mother's very upset. That card you sent—" "Stop," I interrupted. "This isn't about a card. This is about everything." Silence again. Then, "Go ahead." I took a breath. "For 32 years, I've been the responsible one, the practical one, the one who never needed much. And you've used that to justify treating me like I'm less. I put myself through college while Evan got a fully funded private education. I lived in a dorm that had black mold while you rented him a luxury apartment in Manhattan. I paid off student loans while you bought him camera equipment for every birthday. That's not fair, my father began. I'm not finished, I said. You never sent Evan an invoice? I continued. Not for the tuition, not for the apartment, not for the trips. But you sent me one for $100 for his trip, for his equipment, for a Christmas I wasn't even invited to. It wasn't meant to hurt you. My mother cut in, her voice fragile. We just assumed. You assumed I'd pay, I said, because I always do. You've always treated me like a second income stream, not a daughter. We're getting older, my father said, pivoting. We need to know we can count on you. Evan's still building his career. You're established. It's time to contribute more. I let out a breath that tasted like betrayal. You're my parents, not my creditors. That's not how families work, he snapped. No, I said quietly. That's not how your version of family should work, but it's how it's always worked with us. We've always done our best. No, you've done your best for Evan. You gave him the benefit of every doubt, the best of every resource. And me. You gave me praise for being resilient when really you were just giving me less and calling it a compliment. There was a rustle on the other end. I could hear my mother crying softly the way she did when she wanted me to stop. I'm not saying this to hurt you, I said, but I need you to hear it. I'm not going to keep pretending everything's fine just because it's convenient. And what exactly do you want from us? Charles asked. Do you want money? An apology. I shook my head even though he couldn't see me. I want recognition, accountability, not guilt, not theatrics, just truth. I paused, then added, I'll be your daughter. But I won't be your nurse. I won't be your ATM. And I'm not going to sacrifice my peace to preserve a dynamic that only benefits one of us. There was no response. Just breathing on the other end of the line, tired, tight, defensive. I'm going to hang up now, I said. I've said what I needed to say. Claire, my mother whispered, we love you. I know you think that, I replied. But love without respect doesn't feel like love. It feels like obligation. I clicked end call before I could cry. I didn't expect a response. I didn't need one. But the next day my phone rang again. Evan. I stared at his name on the screen for a moment before answering. Hey, I said. Hey. He sounded different. Not defensive, not smug, smaller somehow. I just found out about the invoice, he said. I didn't know they sent that to you. I waited. I wouldn't have let them, he added. Not if I'd known. You would have taken the trip, though, I said. And the camera. And the support. Like always. He was quiet. Yeah, I would have. There was something in his voice, embarrassment maybe. Or something more honest. I'm not mad at you, I said. I'm mad at what our family made us into. I think I knew, he admitted. I just didn't want to look too closely. Being the favorite, it's comfortable, but it's also hollow. I'm 30 and I can barely do anything without them. Being the favorite didn't protect you, I said. It just kept you weak. He exhaled. That's what I'm starting to realize. We talked for almost an hour. For once there was no pretense, no performative cheerfulness. Just truth. He told me about his doubts, the way he sometimes wondered if he actually had talent, or if our parents were just inflating him to make up for his failures. He told me how tired he was of depending on them but didn't know how to break away, how ashamed he felt now looking at everything they'd given him that I never got. I guess I always thought you didn't need it, he said. You made everything look easy. I didn't need less, I replied. I just needed differently. But they never asked what that was. We ended the call on a tentative note, not healed, not fixed, but open. For the first time in years, it felt like we were siblings, not competitors, not opposites, just two people born into the same dysfunction finally trying to see each other clearly. Change didn't come all at once. It never does. It began slowly, almost imperceptibly, like the first few warm days after a long Chicago winter. The kind where you keep your coat zipped anyway, not quite trusting the sun. 2 weeks after our phone call, Evan texted to say he'd started seeing a therapist. He didn't over-explain it or send a wall of self-reflection. Just, "Her name's Tasha. She's tough, but fair. It's time I figured some stuff out." Then a photo followed. He was behind the counter at a local photography store stocking shelves. Part-time, cashier, humble pie meet Evan. I laughed out loud when I saw it, not in mockery, but with relief. It was the first thing he'd done in years that wasn't wrapped in our parents' money. Diane was slower to shift, but I noticed the difference. She started calling, not often, not with grand emotion, but with quiet sincerity. "Just checking in," she'd say. "I saw your campaign mentioned in Ad Age. That's a big deal, right?" It was. And it meant something that she'd noticed. Once she asked what kind of tea I liked. The next time I visited, it was waiting in the cupboard. A small gesture, but a conscious one. Charles remained the hardest to read. He was still clipped, still formal. But I started receiving emails from him that didn't have subject lines like "action required." One simply said, "Congratulations on the new account. I saw the ad. Strong work. Proud of you." No warm emojis, no exclamation points. But it was a beginning. Meanwhile, my life blossomed in unexpected ways. Work felt different, lighter, clearer. I was no longer dragging the invisible weight of trying to prove myself to people who'd never be convinced. I pitched, boldly spoke up more in meetings, mentored junior associates without falling into the trap of being their fixer. 3 months later, I was promoted to Director of Strategic Branding, the youngest ever at our agency. When HR sent out the announcement, Adam showed up to my office with champagne and a bouquet of sunflowers, my favorite. But that wasn't the only celebration on the horizon. That spring, we took a weekend trip to Michigan's wine country. Just a simple escape, fields, cool breezes, and vineyards as far as the eye could see. On our second day, Adam led me to a quiet hilltop overlooking the vines. He handed me a folded note. I opened it. Just one line. "You've spent too long proving your worth. Let me be someone who never questions it." When I looked up, he was on one knee, ring in hand. I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I whispered then, louder. "Yes." We toasted that night with sparkling rosé and sticky hands from too many cider donuts. I felt something I hadn't felt in years, not just loved, but safe. At home, I took the check from my parents, the $8 $100 invoice still uncashed, still absurd, and had it framed. I hung it above my desk in my home office, not out of spite, but as a symbol. A receipt not for a debt owed, but for a debt I refused to carry anymore. I started something else too. An online workshop called Unlearning the Role: Financial Freedom for Daughters Who Raised Themselves. It began as a blog post, then grew into a monthly Zoom series where women shared stories of being the responsible ones, the overlooked ones, the ones who quietly made everything work. We cried together. We laughed. We stopped apologizing. One woman told me I always thought I was selfish for wanting fairness, but your story made me realize I was just tired of being invisible. In July, my parents hosted their 40th wedding anniversary dinner. A modest affair, family only held at the house in Brookfield. The same house where I had once been uninvited, where stockings had hung in neat rows that excluded mine. I debated going. Not because I hadn't forgiven them truthfully, I had in my own way, but because I was no longer willing to walk into rooms that made me small. But then Evan called. "They're trying," he said, slowly, awkwardly, "but I think they're starting to get it." "Will you be there?" I asked. "I wouldn't go without you," he replied. So I went. Walking into that house felt surreal. The furniture was rearranged. New photos lined the mantel. This time, one of me at my promotion party sat prominently beside Evan's gallery opening. My mother greeted me at the door with a nervous smile and a hug that lingered longer than usual. Dinner was awkward, yes. But it wasn't unbearable. When I complimented the dessert, my mother beamed. "It's lemon tart. I remember you always preferred tart to sweet." She had remembered something small, something mine. Later, while the others were in the living room laughing at an old story of Evan's, my mother pulled me into the kitchen. "I need to tell you something," she said, hands clasped tightly. "I'm sorry, Claire." "Truly, I didn't realize how much we were hurting you. For so long." I looked at her uncertain. "How could you not know you excluded me from Christmas? You sent me a bill." "I was so used to things being a certain way," she said. "Evan always needed more. Or, I thought he did, and you were just always okay. But that's no excuse. I see it now, and I want to do better." She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She simply stood there, voice low, eyes honest. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. As we left that night, Charles handed me an envelope. I stared at it, hesitant. "No tricks," he said. "Just something overdue." In the car, I opened it. Inside was a check, $8, $100. The exact amount of the invoice. No note, no explanation. Just the number, just the gesture. I didn't cash it. I took it home and slipped it behind the one already hanging in my office, not because I needed the money, but because I wanted to remember. Remember that I had once been asked to pay for belonging and chose not to. Remember that drawing boundaries isn't about punishment, it's about truth. They may never fully see me. They may always see some version of the daughter they preferred, polished, quiet, grateful. But that's no longer the daughter I see. I see the woman who stopped apologizing. I see the leader who built her own table. I see the daughter who finally stopped trying to earn a seat at theirs. And that changes everything.